Hello, friends. Welcome. It's week 7, lecture 3, which is really exciting. It's also really sad because that means we have next week, and then you guys are going on to greener pastures. You guys are advancing and you're moving to wherever you are going. And that's really exciting, but it's really sad. You guys have been an incredible class. I'm really grateful that I've gotten the opportunity to teach you. A couple things coming up. As always, discussion questions due Sunday. If you decide to take a completion, that's a-okay. I will be sending out an email tomorrow to everybody. That email is going to say, this is where you're currently at from an assignments perspective. You're good to go. Or, hey, I'm awaiting more things from you. This is what you need in order to pass from an assignments, from a discussion question side. Hey, I have a passing belt exam, or I don't have anything, but you qualify for a completion, or I don't have anything and you don't qualify for a completion. You'll have all that information. If you haven't already taken the exam, I would really encourage you guys. If you haven't taken the exam and you have a code, then make sure you reach out. If you haven't taken the exam and you haven't asked for a code, just as a reminder, I'm not going in. If you didn't qualify for the first time, I kind of said this back in week 5, you'll need to come and reach out to me and make sure, hey, that I know that you've submitted your assignments, because I'm not just checking that 24/7. So if you have finally qualified and submitted enough assignments and you're ready to take the exam, you need to email me and I can get you that code. I would really encourage you guys, if you haven't already taken the exam, at least try it this weekend. What you don't want to do is take it on Tuesday and get really close and maybe could have changed 1 or 2 things and passed, and then fail and have to retake an entire 8 weeks. So even though it's scary, at least dip your toes into what the exam looks like, how it feels, so that, so that way we can make sure that you are taken care of and good to go there. So yeah, just like Paul said, time is ticking. Just as a reminder, we are here, week 7, crushing it, loving it. We have until week 8, and particularly until if you are needing a retake. Now, if you're needing a retake, because I am finishing exams still, I will give you an extra day if that's what's needed, right? If you're like, hey, most of you guys, I don't think there's anybody that has failed. There's a couple of people that have taken it and just haven't turned something in. But of the ones that I've graded, you guys have been incredible. So I'm not worried about this. But if you do get to that point and you have to take a retake and you need like an extra day, I can do that. Now, if you haven't taken the exam, I can't give you an extra day, because nothing that I did or anybody did has affected the fact that you haven't taken the exam. So if you haven't taken the exam, or you're not kind of in that weird retake section, then your last chance to start an exam is Tuesday. If you need to, start an exam Wednesday, you just come talk to me, and then I can make sure that you qualify for that. We can make that happen. But just as a reminder, you don't have the full week next week for discussion questions. You don't have the full week for assignments. It's all due by 11:59 p.m. EDT on Wednesday here. So please make sure you go in and you do your discussion questions. You do have one core assignment this week called authors. So make sure that you go and do that. If you've done every single assignment, including all product managers, then if you in theory didn't want to do it, then that's okay. You can do that. But I will be sending out an email. Lots of times students will think that they're all good to go, and then that'll reflect different on my end. So that's why I send out an email on Friday of week 7, just in case there's any sort of, don't want you thinking, oh, I'm good to go, and then all of a sudden there be a discrepancy, and then we're like, oh, you have to retake, and then it's a whole thing. So I'll be sending that out tomorrow. As far as exams go, I am very close to finishing every exam. I just have a handful left. I haven't sent out emails yet, but I have updated on the platform. So if you're curious, right now, I have everyone that I have graded. The exam, the grade is updated on the platform. So you will see there that, you'll see that you'll reflect it. And if you didn't pass, which I don't think anybody hasn't passed yet, again, except for those that haven't even submitted an exam. If you didn't pass, I would have emailed you, but nobody's been in that boat. Everybody's passed. Everybody's crushed it. Lots of black belts, lots of reds, lots of oranges. You guys did incredible. So I will, this is my promise to you. I will grade every exam that has been submitted today. I will grade every exam, and this will be done tonight. So by tomorrow, you will have an idea, or tonight, if you wait it up. You'll have an idea of, I think I have like 5 left. You'll have an idea of what you need next. Obviously, here's what I would say. If you would like a new, let's say you get an orange belt or a red belt, and you're like, I want to go for black belt, you are welcome to do that. That is a-okay. I would also say that, you know, yeah, you're welcome to do that. Is it necessary? Sure. I mean, if you want to test yourself, that's totally fine. Happy to adhere to that. But also, just as a reminder, your certificate doesn't even show those. So it's just a personal thing, but I fully get it. If you want a black belt, or if you want to kind of become a TA, you can come back and do a black belt. I'm sorry, I'm just, give me 1 second. Cool. I also wanted to give you an overview of what's next. So like we talked about, next Friday, you will receive an email. There's a couple things. You'll receive an email from your new instructor that gives you kind of information similar to how I sent you at the very beginning, information on the class, new class, Zoom link, everything like that. Just as a reminder, next week, so not next week, sorry, the week after, so the 29th through the 2nd, that is a blackout week, meaning that we are not instructing. There is no class. There is no anything. Your class email should say that, right? Your instructor should say, hey, by the way, this has happened. Please don't, please make sure that you don't come to class or think we have class. This is a great time for you to move forward and kind of work ahead. It just, in all honesty, it's summer. Work ahead, work even just a little bit ahead, because then you can, you can kind of take a little bit more time, and it's a little bit easier going, especially if you're doing a personal project or if you're going to another language. You have those archive playlists, you have everything that you will need for that. One reminder is that if you do work ahead in the week, discussion questions won't be open, I don't believe. But then if you work ahead, any assignment that you submit, because technically the stack doesn't start until, what is that, the 5th? Because it doesn't technically start until the 5th, you will have to just resubmit your assignments. So maybe just don't submit them yet, and then submit them once it actually starts, and you can be super ahead. And it feels great there. Perfect. So yeah, and then there'll also be an IndusTech survey. I'll email you guys that out. But again, that's a helpful survey for us Coding Dojo employees, myself and our TAs. Help us know how we're doing, how we did, what we could have done better. So that way, any students that come following this, we can improve and help that experience as well. For those of you that are going to a new class, it'll look very similar to what we have and what we currently are going to. Or what we just did. So this is sort of the what's next. If you're going on to Java, I don't think you can go on to Python. I think you kind of just, unless you started out as a one stacker and then now you've added another stack and want to take Python. But if you're going to another stack, it's going to look very, very similar. You are going to get, it's going to be an 8-week course. You're going to create a CRUD application from beginning to end. You'll use a database. You'll have all that information. And it'll be something very similar. You use similar tools like bcrypt, and you'll use this thing called session, which is very similar to state. If you are not, let's say you've done, this is your last stack, you're going to go into projects and algorithms. Let me look that up. Projects and algorithms. So this is what projects and algorithms is going to look like. I think this is the updated version. Yeah, perfect. So you will, I'm not exactly sure who you'll have. I can look at that if we, oh, dang it. If you are curious, but whoever it is will be awesome. I think it's either Jason or Lee, or there's tons of people, but this is a really cool, different class. I actually love this idea because this is really setting you up for your kind of getting out there, your resume and your interview process. What you're going to do is it's a four-week stack, and it's going to be sort of spread out in two different ways. You're going to have the first 2 weeks is you're going to be working on a personal project. And this can be in any language that you've been taught. You can do it in MERN, you can do it in Python, you could do it in Java, you could do it as a combination. If you wanted to have a Flask backend and you wanted to have React as a front end, which is very doable and very normal, you can do that, right? As long as you've done that, it's any sort of project. And what you'll do is you will talk with your instructor. You're going to give basically, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to accomplish. And your instructor will help you think about what is an MVP. That's a minimum viable product. And then what would be nice to have, but don't overestimate. Just in 2 weeks is not a long time to build an entire full stack application with API calls and everything like that. So thinking through, okay, here's V0, right? Just in order for this application to work, here's the things that I need. Here's what I can add in V1, V2, V3. So these next iterations, that'll be really helpful. So you'll have that week to kind of think through that and even start building it if you want. The only thing that I would say, and only thing I would caution you with starting to build your personal project, is that you will need, there's certain criteria you do have to meet. And so and you have to get it approved. So if you spend a week working on something and then your instructor's like, actually, that's not going to work, that'll be a bigger issue. Really, the main things, as long as you have some sort of CRUD application, and then if you've got Python or Java, you have to have a login and registration. MERN is not required. You don't have to have a login and registration, though I'm teaching you login and registration. So I would say just add it because it makes it better. But as long as you have those things, it should be a-okay. And you can even email your instructor and just kind of be like, hey, I want to get a jump. This is my thought. What can I do there? So it'll be sort of the core assignment portion. You will also have other assignments. You're going to be talking a lot about algorithms. And so something that we do here in boot camps is we're really good at teaching code, right? And this is sort of a known concept within sort of the industry, is that everybody that comes out of a boot camp can code circles around CS students, so around computer science students. A lot of them have zero idea genuinely how to code. They don't code very much within class, and that's because it is a pretty antiquated system in regards of, in order for states to approve certain languages, they have to, there's a bunch of hoops to jump through. And as you guys probably know, tech moves faster than the government. When we see that all the time, right? And those really funny TikTok trials and stuff like that. And so bootcamp people can really code really, really well, but CS students typically know sort of the depth of the inner workings of how data is stored, how it's measured, what is this idea of time and space complexity. And so what we're trying to do, or what we do here, is introduce you to some of these concepts, because in the interview, they're going to ask you about your projects, how you can code, but they're also going to ask, and it's just part of it, it's called whiteboarding. It used to be, because back in the day, you used to go on campus, you'd go on a whiteboard and actually write out code. It's a great tool. I would encourage you guys to do that. Just write out code instead of, especially if you're using Copilot right now, you will not have that in exam. So I would really get used to, I would turn off Copilot for this, so that way you can get used to typing it. Because for an interview, you can't use Copilot, but it's going to help you start thinking through, how do you algorithmically solve a problem? If it's saying, I want to do this, like, for example, I interviewed with a company called Palantir, and their interview process was, after I got through to the actual coding was, they're like, hey, we are a government response data section, right? And we need governments look to us to identify areas of vulnerability, and, they can look to us. And then if there's a catastrophic event, we can help them. And so one of them was, hey, let's pretend that there's a city that's on a hill, and it's a volcano and it's erupting. We need to find what is the most vulnerable houses. How are you going to do that? And they gave a bunch of data points. I definitely failed that. But that's the idea, right? Where you go and you would algorithmically find a way. Okay, here's are my data points, here's how I'm going to do this. It's called depth first search or breadth first search. I learned that after. But it's just ways to traverse data or data portions. And so that's what we start teaching you. Really, you just go into fundamental portions. Basically, some of this stuff is going to feel like it is The same thing, like what is a data type? Okay, a number, I know this, but you need to kind of go in the inner workings of how is a number stored? How is a string stored? What's the difference between an array or a list in Python and JavaScript, sorry, that they're what we call dynamic, meaning that they can expand and we can grow them and shrink them however we want, and how memory handles that versus how Java does it, or a statically typed, right? A firm language. And so this is what we sort of start walking you through. Chaining and nesting, you really dive into for loops. And if you have if statements, you'll start seeing if you have nested for loops, meaning that you have a for loop inside of a for loop inside of a for loop, or just two of them, a for loop inside of a for loop, how can that slow down your code? What I would encourage you guys to do is to use ChatGPT on the side of this, write your code how you would, not using Copilot. And then the best way to get this out of it is, okay, here's my code. I want to try to calculate the time and space complexity of your code on your own. Then put it in ChatGPT, see if you're right. So what is the time and space complexity of this? And then say, make my code, can you make my code more efficient? And then, document what you did to make it more efficient and why. Doing that will, I can guarantee you, make your understanding of code and especially algorithms exponentially wider and deeper. And then you start competing sort of with those computer science people as well. Just in that regard. So you'll go through that. You'll have some algorithm practice that you've got to do things like print -52 to 100 or 1066 using a for loop. I believe you do this all in JavaScript. So you guys are kind of coming straight back into that, but you can do all of this information. I would encourage you guys really doing, like, you'll have some core assignments in this. I'm trying to find one, but you'll have also some other ones like, yes, setting and swapping. These are important things to note and to do because it'll help you in your job search. That's the first couple of weeks. The second couple of weeks, the last 2 weeks, will be you doing a group project. And the whole point of this is, A, you need to learn how to work in a team, because you will likely be, hopefully, you're on a team and you're not working on your own, because then you'll be really sad and it'll be overwhelming. But secondly, it helps you with GitHub and merging and dealing with branches, because it's a harder thing to do. And so it'll help you kind of really practice that. So the last 2 weeks will be a group project that you'll present it, and you'll work on a group, right? And so you can kind of preemptively, if you know people are going to go to projects and algorithms and you have already created some good relationships, you can do that. I believe it can only be in a group of 3 to 4 at the max. But you will learn a ton of stuff in this next stack, and it's really, really great. There's also another thing that I would suggest, that if you've got the time, especially next week, it is a course. It's called Harvard. If you haven't already done it, CS50. It's a free course that Harvard gives out. It is a legendary course, sort of in development. Everybody knows this course. Everybody says to start with this course. You can look at it. I think literally on Harvard. Yeah. So it's 11 weeks long. So it's 11 lectures. It's self-paced, but you can just do it. It's free. You can do it on Coursera or edX, or there's a million ways to do it. And it's literally you just literally click enroll, and then it'll enroll you, and you can watch it. But this is a great one just to really help from the basics. This is their entry-level computer science course. Again, this is a legendary course within the development space. So if you're talking shop with people and you're like, oh yeah, it's CS50, everybody's going to know what you're talking about. My last little sort of, again, because next week's going to be a little bit packed, my last little thing that I would say, give me 1 second, is there's another book out there, if you guys like books, that again is another legendary one. Now you don't have to have this, you don't have to buy this, that is a-okay, but it is called Cracking the Coding Interview. It's green. I don't know if hopefully it's showing, but it's called Cracking the Coding Interview by Gail Lockman McDowell. It is the Bible of computer science. Most people have read this, have worked through it. It helps with algorithms, helps you understand lots of stuff. I encourage you guys, if you can, pick it up, start working through it, do CS50 and that'll get you in a really, really, really good spot for kind of what's coming next, and start preparing for your job search. my encouragement is do not wait until you are finished with the course to start searching for a job. You guys are almost done. You have 4 weeks. The hiring process usually takes anywhere from 2 to 3. Just like once you get in, and then from getting in to getting hired can take 2 to 3 months. And sometimes it takes a little bit to get in. So I would start now. Again, boost your engagement on LinkedIn. It sounds stupid, but that is how recruiters can help find you. It helps that. Look on Indeed. And we'll go over kind of job search stuff next Thursday when I go over my what I wish I knew. And I give you all the tips and tools for kind of your career. And then just money is what we'll talk about, money and equity and options and what is the difference and just things I wish I knew. I'm not a genius. I'm not anything like that. I've just gone through it and nobody told me the difference between equity and base and all of this stuff and how to compare. And it's challenging. So that's why I kind of do this at the end. But are there any questions on what's next, what to expect? Any just kind of questions there? Again, we've got a pretty easy class today. Just a couple things we're given and asked. So any questions there?
I have a quick question about just for algorithms. I was wondering how much is it going to be focused on like kind of building a algorithm just like out of like for loops and kind of building it yourself versus using certain methods to assist you? Is that something you're supposed to do or avoid?
So I'm sorry, let me try to understand.
Mhm.
Everything you're building will just be sort of native. The way you do it, sort of the way you set it up can follow different things. So like depth first search versus breadth search first search with nodes is something that you're still natively writing it. But here would be the example is, let me annotate real quick. So let's say that you've got this node, and if you guys don't know what a node is, that's okay. It's just something that's going to store data, right? And then it's got some children. So it's got a child node here, and a node can have up to 2 children. Perfect. And it can also just have 1. That's fine. And then this child can have another child, and it just is a branch, right? So what you're wanting to do is you want to traverse this. And so you'll look at like linked lists and doubly linked lists. So you want to traverse this. So you're going to write the code on how to do it. It just, the difference would be which format do you follow? Meaning breadth first search means that you are going to check here. And is this what you're looking for? If it's not, then you check here. And if it's not, then you check here. Right. And then once you've checked kind of this level, you're going to go down another level and you're going to check here. And then you're going to check here. Right. And so you're writing that natively with the, and so you just the way you're setting up your code and how you're checking, does it go to the next one? Does it go to the child? You're writing all of that. It's just you're following sort of this format. Whereas if you were to go back and do something like depth first search, the way it operates is it comes and it's searching for something and it's going to go to the deepest point. So it's going to go here, then it's going to go here and it's going to check here. And then it's going to check here. And then it's going to traverse back up and then it's going to come down here. And it's going to check here. And if this had a child, let's say that this was like here, it would, instead of checking here first, it would come down here and check and then check. And so you're still doing for loops and you're still writing that. It just is what is the format of what you're setting that up. And you're going to learn all of this. So if you're like looking at me, you're like, what the heck are we talking about? You're going to learn all about these. But I just wanted to clarify, you will write the code and it'll look the same in the sense of you're writing code, you're writing for loops, while loops. At the base of it, that's really all you're doing is you're iterating through some data. You might use something, use maps or hash maps or whatever you use, but you're still just trying to find out some information. You just might look a little bit different if you decide to do breadth first versus depth first, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Cameron?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anybody else have anything? Yeah, and you're gonna learn all of that stuff. There's an entire section like trees. So those are binary search trees, depth first search, breadth first search. You'll learn about recursion. You'll learn a whole bunch of things. Let's see if it's even in here. Yeah, so breadth first search. And then you'll do depth first search, I'm assuming. No, maybe it's in here. Oh no, they guess we just do breadth first search. Interesting. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions on kind of what to expect? Again, I'll shoot you an email, but then on Wednesday also, I will let you know, hey, you're good to go. And I'll probably do it Monday as well. Just to let you know, hey, you're good to go. No worries on anything else. Enjoy the rest of your week. And if you guys want to come to lecture, I think they're going to be great lectures. We're going to finish up that off. And then this is often a favorite lecture of this end of stack career tips and tricks, because I do just get really transparent about everything. And students end up taking a lot from that. So, but obviously everything's recorded. So if you can't make it, that's a-okay. Okay. Cool. I got a couple requests for what we can go over for today. And so I just wanted to do that. The first one, or there's a couple, somebody asked me to talk about lifting state, about bootstrap. And then another person asked me for this guy. I know that we kind of just did the back end of our show. I didn't finish the front end because we didn't get to that point, but I do have this code right here, which is, this is what you should have done with Robert. And I have a full code. So we're going to kind of walk through that. And if there's any questions or anything you guys need, then we can walk through that. But I will also, somebody just basically said, hey, can you put this up to GitHub? And so I just have this code here and I'll push it to GitHub as well. So you guys have access to this. Cool. So somebody had asked about lifting state. And this idea of lifting state is, if we are going to have a piece of state, let's go to the drawing board. I haven't drawn in a while. Let's say we've got this piece of state right here, and this is my app.js. Let me do some text. Ugh, why is that in black? Okay, this is my app.js. And then let's say we're just talking about a product, right? Or a list of products. And we've got some children components. We've got our product component, and we'll have our dashboard component. And we can kind of go from there. But let's say we have this guy. Oops. I am recording. Perfect. But thanks for catching that and making sure. So here are my two children, right? I've got we'll call this our product. Product.jsx. And then here's going to be maybe just a dashboard. .jsx. Now, let's say, for example, they both needed some idea, or they needed access to a piece of state. Let's say we had this list of products and we wanted to keep track of all of our products. We wanted to show them. We wanted to be able to show a product page, or just some reason that they need to share this piece of state. Now, we know that we cannot share state amongst children, right? That is not allowed. We cannot do that. Just because of the hierarchy of how state operates, we cannot do that. And so what we can then do, let's say that we wanted to have, I'll just put it like this. We'll just say like our state. We'll call it like this. Instead of having a piece of state for each one and trying to update and kind of handle that, because that wouldn't work, right? If I just had these two separate pieces of state and I updated it on one and I didn't update it on the other, or I had to try to figure out another way to update it. This is my product state. That wouldn't work if I tried to manage and handle multiple pieces of the same state. That doesn't really operate well, right? And so what we can do is we can actually lift our state. And so to the parent of the component that we need. So let's say we wanted to take our state up here. And now, because the state is lifted, because we have access to it and we have given it to our parent, a parent can share state with a child, meaning that because it's here, right, because it's up in my parent, I can now pass this state down here and access it in my child, and I can access it up here in my dashboard. You can sort of think about it like and it's kind of a weird thing, so maybe this isn't going to work as I say it. I'm kind of Michael Scotting it and starting a sentence and not knowing where it's going to go. You sort of think about it like an inheritance, right? If you've got a sibling and they pass away, you often aren't going to have access to any of their inheritance, especially if they have a family or sort of their funds, right? If they have a family, if they have kids, they have a husband, it's going to go to them. And vice versa, right? If I pass away, my wife is going to get everything. And if we had a child, that would happen. My sisters would not, right? That's not really, unless I set up my will that way, whatever. But if your parent has something, you can inherit that from your parents, right? Or you think about traits from like a physical standpoint or DNA, right? If you have two children and both parents have certain DNA, there's going to be similarities from skin tone, from hair, from height, from, kind of whatever it is, facial structures. You inherit that from your parent, but you can't, if I had something and I had like a stepbrother or a adopted sibling, I couldn't give them any of my DNA, right? We can't share that. And so the way that this works is we can lift state up, and then what we do is we pass it in as props. So as I am giving it to my child, right here, we're going to basically treat this as props, or we're going to treat this as like this, some little inheritance. So we're going to have it here and we're going to pass it in here. And what this is going to be is our props, right? And so that way our props and props. So that way when our child gets it, right, and they get this value, they can destructure it and say, okay, great, you gave me this. I want to destructure it and I'm going to know it as, product list. Great. So now wherever I am in dashboard, I have access to product list. Now the value exists up here in our app.js, but I can pass that down and give it access, or give my children access to that piece of information. Props is not just a hard data as well. I can pass in functions. I can pass in lots of things, right? If I have my setter, if I want to set my list, if I want some sort of functionality that maybe on my product or my dashboard, I want a delete function and I want to be able to delete that, I can do that, right? I can pass in through props. I can pass in that information. I can pass in any sort of thing that I need to pass in and something that I think is relevant. One other thing I want to note is that both siblings do not have to inherit the same things, right? Let's say you've got a favorite child, right? And you want to give them 2 lollipops, and you've got another child who's just been a real pain and they only want to get 1 lollipop, right? I can do that. I can show favoritism. I don't have to pass in the same pieces of information to each child. Or let's say that I've got a child that is gluten intolerant and I have 2 sandwiches, right? And one is gluten and one is not. I can give them totally separate things. They don't have to inherit anything that's similar, right? As long as I'm passing it in, and I will pass it in via props. Are there any questions on this visualization? And then I'll actually get into the code and you can kind of see what that looks like. Any sort of any sort of clarifying things? Yeah, thanks, Alex, for putting a 1 in there. I just know yesterday a lot of people asked about lifting state, so I just wanted to make sure that I am communicating that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And then we'll kind of look at it. Yeah, Jennifer, this is a great question. So let's look at our app.js here. Oops, I'm still in my right. Okay. My app.js here, basically here's what I've created in this code. This is what we've got. We've got this team manager. our player dashboard where we can create a player, we can edit a player, right? We have all this information. Perfect. Let's go back to my app.js. Cool. So right now I'm not really doing or passing in anything from a props perspective, or from a component perspective, but let's say that I have got, let's say, use state. Cool. So let's say that I wanted to say something like const players, set players. Let's say I had this list and I wanted to pass this through. And let's say I wanted that because I wanted my player dashboard to be able to view that. I want to be able to view them all here. But let's say that for some reason, or on this main dashboard, and then on my edit player, I wanted to be able to edit player, but I also wanted it to have access to my, I wanted to have access to a list of all my players. Again, this is all hypothetical, but I can do that. Now, what I can do is, in my app.js, I've got my element, right? And I have my player form here. I have my path. This is my routing. Well, if I wanted them to have access to that, then what I could do is I could say something like player list equals, I believe it's curly bracket, and I would say players. Perfect. So now in my player, oh, this is my player form. Let's go back to the actual one that I said. My dashboard. And so now my player dashboard is a component that's being mounted. And we're saying, hey, when you mount this or when this is called, right? So when it goes to API players, I also, I want you to mount this, but I also want to give some information here. I want you to have this information. And the information I want you to have is this list or this array of players. Now, let's say that I wanted the same thing in my edit player. Again, let's say it doesn't really make sense, but from a hypothetical perspective, let's say that I wanted to show my player list. But within that, let's say I wanted to basically do some sort of functionality to change, or in my, okay, let's do it this way. Let's say my player dashboard, I wanted to be able to delete a user, right? I wanted to be able to delete a player and I wanted to reapply. I wanted this new list without that player, right? I want to set that state. Again, this is all hypothetical without sort of a database, but let's say I want to do that. I wanted to be able to delete it. And then I wanted to reset my state to not have that user anymore instead of doing an Axios call. Well, I don't need that on my edit player, right? But I do want that on my player dashboard. So what I could do is say set player list equals set players. Perfect. And so now my player dashboard has access to two pieces of props. I've got my player list, which is this guy, and I now have this function of set player list here, right? Just my setter. If I had another just function, if I just had let's say that this use effect was just another random function, then I could just throw that in there too, right? I could just throw in that function name and then go from there. But as we can see, I don't have to pass in the same pieces of information to each child, right? Let's say I didn't even want the entire player list. I just wanted the functionality to do that. I can have two separate pieces. I don't have to have everything the same. This can be passed in just whatever we call player list. That is what it'll be referred to, right? And then here's this set player list. Now I would go to my actual dashboard itself. And then within my dashboard, I would just have set player list. And remember, this is destructuring my props by itself. So instead of me having to say, const set player list equals props, I can just do it this way. And this is saying, hey, component, expect to take in, you're going to have a prop. We're going to call it player list, destructure that, have that there. And then wherever I wanted to within this code, I could then reference player list from, and that information is coming from my parent component of my app.js. Cool. Any questions on this? I know Jennifer, does that make sense from like an actual example of how we would use this or what we could do there? Again, the real way to think about it, if you're like, hey, I have a piece of state that I need access in multiple components, that right there is like ding, ding, ding. I should lift state and put that up. If you don't need it, right? Like, so as you could tell, actually, before I even did this, I actually didn't even lift any state for this. Right. I could have, right. I guess I could have in theory. If I'm doing the same Axios call, you could do that. And then you're good to go. And maybe you kind of diminish how many Axios get calls you have. But yeah. Yusuf said, can you use context? Yeah. So context is another way that you can sort of globally manage state. Now, I would say that using use context is great. There's also other ways to do it, as if you guys are diving and trying to find something a little bit easier. So like Redux, Redux is a really, really, really common way to manage state that's kind of more enterprise. So if you guys are interested in that, I would look into Redux. And that's another common tool and library to manage your own state globally. So, but yeah, you could use context to do sort of the same thing. Cool. Now, the second thing that was asked was to go over Bootstrap. And there's just a few things I want to touch on Bootstrap. Just as a reminder, if you guys are going to do Bootstrap, there's two ways. You could either npm install it, or you could be like me. And I just, in my public folder of my client, I go to my index.html, and then I have my reference link right here. Whoa, reference link right here. There you go. There's the whole thing. So then I reference it. Now I have access to all of the material within Bootstrap, right? And all Bootstrap is, you can think about it as a big fancy CSS file, where within this file, it's got some classes. So as long as we call that, we get all access to all the CSS code. That's really all it is. The one main thing to know with Bootstrap is it operates this way. Is, let's say we've got our window, right? This is just our window, our browser window. Is it operates in segments of 12 columns. Now, these are not going to be right, and I'm not going to do all 12. You guys can envision 12 even columns along the entire screen. Now, it's important because they're all even, and it's important because that allows us to be dynamic, meaning that whether the screen is smaller, i.e. they're on a cell phone, or it's larger, they're on a TV, or they're on a big monitor, it allows it to, the columns grow, right? Because they are consistently the same size within one another, meaning, whether the screen is 100 or it is 1,000 megapixels, it is split into 12 even sections. So no matter what, it allows us that even if our screen moves, it allows us to kind of, it still is going to look and be consistent with that. Now, there's things that you can dive into that, okay, if it is a cell phone, I want it to operate a little bit differently. You can get into that, but we don't need to, sort of, for what we're doing now. The main thing we need to know is that there's 12 even columns, what we call a grid, that's how it's built up, right? And so by knowing that, we can look at our code and we can manipulate and say, okay, using those grids, I'm just going to come up here for a second. Let me get rid of this. There's a couple things I can do. If I say column medium 6, what this is saying is I want 6 columns. The size is medium. You could just do call 6. And I think by default, it even is medium. I'm just in a habit of saying medium. And I want it to be 6 columns long. So here I've got a dashboard, and I'm saying I want it to take up half of my columns. What this MX auto is saying is, now within that, I want this to be in the middle. So take up 6 of the 12 columns, but take up the 6 middle columns. So no matter where I'm at within my screen, it's always just going to be in the middle. And it's going to take up about half the screen. Now, if I've got 2 things, I've got 2 divs, or I've got 2 elements, or a login and a registration, I want them side by side, and we'll do this next week. I can put them side by side. That's a-okay. The only thing I need to make sure is that the summation of however many columns it's taking up is not greater than 12, right? So if I've got this that's column medium 6 and another one that's column medium 7, they're going to have to be on different levels because there's only 12, right? And I'm trying to say I want to use up 13 of this grid, and it's like, oh, the max is 12. So then we can't comply with that. So we put it under whatever the first one is. So with that also, you have to understand, and that's just Bootstrap documentation is a portion of the grid, and it's a really important thing. It's something I would say to use. But you can kind of mess with it too, right? If you have them both as column medium 6, you have to understand you're not going to have any space in between them, right? So they're going to be side by side. So you might be like, okay, well, I want them both as 5, and then I can offset means I don't want it to start here on this first one. If I offset it 1 column, then I'm going to start it here. Okay, now I have some space here. So you could do some stuff like that, right? You can mix with it up. And then MT4 is margin top 4, so it goes up to 5. And then MB4 is margin bottom. And so it just gives some spacing. You can kind of think about it like padding. And again, all of this, MT4 is just adding padding to the top. MB4 is just adding padding to the bottom, right? It's all these classes that you just have access to and you can do. And their documentation is great for that. So you can really get a better understanding. It's really valuable when it comes to forms because you can do things within a form. So you just basically, again, column medium 6, MX auto, and it can make it look really, really nice, really, really easily. It's not necessary for the exam. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to do it for the exam. That's a-okay. But you can make it look really nice, really quick by just basically doing things like form control, form group. Hey, this is a form column medium 6. And then by just doing that, it makes it look really nice. And then lastly, you can have a button. And that button, you can change the color. Again, you can change if there's some margin from that button. And it gives it a nice, like once you hover over it, it kind of is a different shade. And again, that's all just CSS, just a class within CSS that we have access to now. So it's a great tool. It does operate a little bit different. So if you guys are using it, it's a-okay. I've used it for all of my code. So if I'm doing any sort of forms, you should be able to see that and have some sort of reference there. And their documentation is great. So if you are wanting to learn more about Bootstrap, it's a great tool. There's 2 different ones. There's Bootstrap for React, and then there's Bootstrap. I just use the normal Bootstrap just because all we're doing is creating a form. I'm not really jumping into, I'm not really jumping into like components of Bootstrap or anything like that. So I can just use normal, but if you wanted to learn something and you wanted to learn it for React, you could absolutely do that. Somebody asked, would you use form for any kind of table? You wouldn't use form, but they do have a table option. So if you're wanting to do Bootstrap, remember table's just a way that we can show and visualize. So I think actually for this dashboard, I've got, yeah, so this is a table. So this is a table right here. And within that, you can still add in the sizes, margin top 4 MX auto. So I want this in the middle. I've got my TR, TH, T heads. And so you just do a table. Tables just so that way we can visualize in a different way. Somebody said they're using Tailwind. Tailwind's really popular. And yeah, it is really complex, but it is really popular. So if you are wanting to use, I would say not that CSS is antiquated because it's not, right? At the end of the day, it's all CSS. But there's lots of tools and lots of things that make life much, much easier than doing native or vanilla, or CSS is kind of an older thing. Not very many people are doing that because there's all this code that's already out there and really complex, cool animations you can do. And there's tons of stuff like that. So it's a great thing, especially if you want to go to the front end, then it's a great tool. If you don't want to go to the front end, I would probably say learn a little bit of Bootstrap and then you're a-okay, because you won't ever have to, if you're not going to be a front end developer, you're never really going to have to build a front end application. And if you're a back end dev and you're searching for back end dev jobs, they're not really going to look and be like, wow, they really don't know how to do a ton with Tailwind, because that's not what you're going to be doing anyway. So it depends on what you like to do. If you are somebody who says, I think I want to go front end side, I think I want to do that, then I would really encourage you to learn one of those. Tailwind, Bootstrap, Material UI is another one for React. It was really popular. So if you're wanting to do that, I would encourage you to use one of those libraries and learn them. So any other questions on Bootstrap? That's all I've got for tonight. The only other thing was if my code could be posted. Again, I don't have anything from the store side. But what I can do is just post this code if this would be helpful. If it wouldn't, if Robert's already done this, then okay, I won't do this. But if it's helpful, I can post this. I don't know. You guys can tell me in chat if you want me to post this code or not. Okay, doke. I'll make sure that I post this in our, I'll just have to copy this folder because it's from the last stack. Because I did the same thing as Robert. Or Robert did that. So somebody asked, can the JS and Bootstrap be used in React? Ooh, great question. I believe so. I'm not sure, Paul, or I haven't used it. Paul or Justina, have you guys ever used the JS and Bootstrap with React?
I have.
The JS what, Lorraine?
Yeah, Bootstrap's got a CDN for their CSS and they've got like a JavaScript CDN as well. I would think as long as it doesn't interact with the actual DOM too much, you know,
Yeah.
like if you get element by ID, you might have some weird rendering issues, but I've never used it.
Yeah, I haven't either. Tony, you could be the pioneer that lets us know. I've just not ever dealt with that. So cool. Okay, great. That's all I've got for today. Unless there's any other questions, I'll get back to grading. And again, all of your exams will be graded tonight. Check your, I don't know that I'll send out all the emails tonight, but just check the platform and then, I'll work on sending out all those emails tomorrow for you. So other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. I'll stay here for about 5 minutes and then, unless there's no questions, and then I will let you guys know. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Have a great night.